I spent months customizing a $4,000 gaming PC for my son. My stepbrother's kids poured soda on it while my stepmom laughed and said, "If my son's kids can't have one, neither can yours." My dad just shrugged. I smiled, laughed quietly. And what I did next made the whole family panic. The whir of cooling fans and the soft RGB glow had become my evening soundtrack for 8 months. Every night after work, I'd spend hours researching components, watching benchmark videos, and carefully planning the perfect gaming setup for my 15-year-old son Jake's birthday. As a single mom working 2 jobs, one as a dental hygienist and another doing freelance bookkeeping, saving up $4,000 wasn't easy, requiring me to set aside every spare dollar while Jake contributed his part-time job earnings from bagging groceries. But Jake had been through enough with a divorce, moving to a new town, and adjusting to his dad's absence. He deserved something special. The custom-built PC was going to be his sanctuary. I'd chosen every component with care: an RTX 4080 graphics card, Intel i7-13700K processor, 32GB of DDR5 RAM, and a beautiful tempered glass case that showcased the synchronized RGB lighting. The liquid cooling system I installed myself after watching countless YouTube tutorials, my hands shaking as I mounted the radiator. Each cable was perfectly routed, each component positioned for optimal airflow. It was a work of art. My father had remarried 2 years ago to Linda, a woman who came with her own complicated family dynamic. Her son Marcus, my stepbrother, was 38 and had never quite figured out how to be an adult. He lived in Linda's basement with his twin 7-year-old boys, Tyler and Connor, after his wife left him for what Linda called irreconcilable differences, but what everyone knew was his gambling addiction and inability to hold down a job. The family dinner where everything went wrong was supposed to be Jake's birthday celebration. I brought the completed PC over to show it off before taking it home, planning to surprise Jake the next morning. The machine sat on my dad's dining room table, its tempered glass side panel reflecting the chandelier light, RGB fans creating a mesmerizing rainbow cascade through the pristine interior. "Wow, Aunt Sarah, that's incredible," Marcus said, genuinely impressed as he examined the build. "Jake's going to flip when he sees this thing. You really went all out." His boys pressed their sticky faces against the glass, leaving fingerprint smears that made me wince internally. Tyler pointed at the graphics card with a juice-stained finger. "What's that big thing?" "That's what makes the games look really pretty," I explained, gently guiding their hands away from the case. "It costs more than some people's entire computers." Linda's expression shifted then, something cold creeping across her features. $4,000? For a toy? "It's not just a toy, Linda. It's Jake's main hobby, and he's been saving his own money toward it too. Plus, I do computer repair on weekends. This will help me teach him valuable skills." "Must be nice," she said, her tone loaded with implications. "Some people can just throw money around like that." The comment stung because she knew my financial situation. Linda had never worked a day since marrying my father, living comfortably off his retirement pension while constantly complaining about money. Meanwhile, I was juggling 2 jobs just to afford a 2-bedroom apartment for Jake and myself. Dinner proceeded awkwardly, with Linda making pointed comments about spoiled children and mothers who try too hard to buy love. My dad remained silent, picking at his meatloaf while avoiding eye contact. This had become his default response to conflict: pretend it wasn't happening and hope it resolved itself. After dessert, I excused myself to use the bathroom. The house was a split-level design, and I could hear voices from the dining room as I walked down the hallway. When I returned, the scene that greeted me made my blood freeze in my veins. Tyler and Connor had somehow gotten hold of their sippy cups filled with grape soda. Purple liquid was cascading through the ventilation slots of my carefully crafted PC, pooling inside the case and dripping onto the floor. The RGB lights flickered once, twice, then died completely as the liquid reached the motherboard. "No!" I screamed, rushing forward, but the damage was already done. $4,000 and 3 months of work ruined in seconds. Linda was laughing, actually laughing, as she watched my devastation. "Oh my goodness, boys, what have you done?" But her tone held no real concern, only amusement. "You need to control your kids," I shouted at Marcus, who looked genuinely mortified. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't see them. If my son's kids can't have one, neither can yours," Linda interrupted, her voice sharp and vindictive. The mask was completely off now. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before flaunting your expensive gifts in front of children who have nothing." I turned to my father, desperate for support, for someone to acknowledge the insanity of what had just happened. "Dad?" He shrugged. Actually shrugged. Accidents happen, honey. It's just stuff. Just stuff. 3 months of overtime shifts, skipped lunches, and careful budgeting reduced to just stuff. The betrayal hit me harder than the destroyed computer. My own father was choosing his new wife's vindictive pleasure over his daughter's heartbreak. The room fell silent as everyone waited for my reaction. Marcus looked sick with guilt, the twins seemed confused by the sudden tension, Linda wore a satisfied smirk, and my dad studied his hands like they contained the secrets of the universe. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile or even a sad smile. It was the kind of smile that comes when something fundamental shifts inside you, when you realize exactly who people really are and what they're capable of. The kind of smile that appears when you stop expecting fairness and start planning accordingly. You're right, Linda, I said calmly, already formulating a plan. Accidents happen. I gathered my purse and keys, gave Jake a quick call to let him know I'd be home late, and walked out of that house without another word. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts, my mind churning through possibilities and connections. See, Linda didn't know about my other job. Besides dental hygiene and bookkeeping, I'd been building a third income stream over the past year, computer repair and tech consulting. What had started as helping neighbors with virus removal had grown into a legitimate side business. I had clients throughout the county, including several small businesses that relied on me for their IT needs. One of those businesses was Pinnacle Auto Sales, owned by Dave Morrison, a guy I'd gone to high school with. Dave had hired me 6 months ago to set up their entire computer network, security cameras, and digital filing system. We'd become friends through the process, and he'd mentioned more than once that he was looking for reliable people to join his sales team. Another client was Jennifer Walsh, a successful real estate agent who'd hired me to fix her laptop and ended up recommending me to have her office. Jennifer had recently mentioned she was looking for a detail-oriented assistant to help manage her growing client base. The plan crystallized during that drive home. Linda thought she could destroy something precious to me without consequences? She was about to learn otherwise. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, I called in sick to both my jobs, something I'd never done unless Jake was genuinely ill. Instead, I drove to the public library and spent 8 hours researching everything I could find about my stepfamily's history. The internet is a treasure trove of information if you know where to look. Court records, property transfers, business licenses, social media posts, all of it painting a picture of Linda's true character that my father had either never seen or chosen to ignore. Linda Marie Henderson, née Williams, née Thompson, née Rodriguez. 3 previous marriages, each one ending in divorce within 5 years. Her first husband, Carlos Rodriguez, had been a successful contractor in Arizona. Their divorce records showed allegations of financial infidelity. Linda had been using business credit cards for personal purchases, and had attempted to claim half ownership of his construction company despite never working there. Her second marriage to Michael Thompson lasted only 2 years. Thompson owned several rental properties in Nevada, all of which Linda tried to claim during the divorce proceedings. The court documents revealed a pattern. She convinced him to put her name on various accounts and properties, then used her access to take out loans and mortgages without his knowledge. The third husband, Robert Henderson, was a retired airline pilot with a substantial pension. Linda had managed to extract a significant settlement from him as well, though the records showed he'd fought harder than the others. There were several motions filed by his attorney regarding fraudulent conveyances and hidden assets, legal terms I had to look up but which painted a disturbing picture of Linda's methods. What struck me most was the timeline. Each marriage had followed the same pattern: a whirlwind courtship, quick marriage, gradual infiltration of the man's finances, escalating conflicts about money, and finally a divorce where Linda walked away with substantial assets. My father was just the latest mark in a decades-long con game. Marcus's history was equally revealing. At 38, he'd never held a steady job for more than 6 months. His employment record showed a pattern of starting positions with enthusiasm, then gradually shirking responsibilities until he was either fired or quit. His ex-wife's court filings painted him as chronically irresponsible, prone to gambling binges, and completely unreliable as a father. The most damaging information came from social media. Marcus had been posting photos of himself at various casinos, bragging about wins and complaining about losses. He'd also posted pictures of expensive electronics and gadgets, claiming to have found great deals on items that clearly cost more than someone unemployed should have been able to afford. His public posts directly contradicted his claims of being broke and unable to pay child support. Linda's social media presence was more carefully curated, but equally revealing. Photos of expensive shopping trips, designer handbags, luxury spa treatments, and high-end restaurants, all while claiming financial hardship to justify her treatment of Jake and me. She'd also posted several rants about spoiled children and irresponsible mothers, clearly referring to situations in our blended family. But the most interesting discovery came from a deep dive into property records. Linda and Marcus had been involved in several questionable real estate transactions over the past year. Properties purchased under Marcus's name with cash, then quickly transferred to shell companies, then sold again within months. The pattern suggested money laundering or tax avoidance, possibly both. I printed everything I found and organized it into a comprehensive file. Bank records, court documents, social media screenshots, property transfers, employment histories, all of it building a case that Linda and Marcus were not just unpleasant people, but active criminals who'd been flying under the radar for years. The second day of my research focused on my father's finances. As his bookkeeper, I had legitimate access to his accounts and records. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the past 2 years, since marrying Linda, my father had lost nearly 60% of his retirement savings. The withdrawals had been gradual and seemingly legitimate: home improvements, medical expenses, family emergencies. But when I cross-referenced the dates and amounts with Linda's social media posts and shopping habits, a different picture emerged. The home improvement expenses corresponded to Linda's luxury purchases. The medical expenses aligned with her spa treatments and cosmetic procedures. The family emergencies coincided with Marcus's gambling binges and expensive electronics purchases. My father wasn't just being manipulated, he was being systematically robbed by his own wife and stepson. The pattern was so clear once I laid it out chronologically, but Dad's trusting nature and desire to avoid conflict had made him the perfect victim. I also discovered that Linda had been intercepting and hiding bills and statements. She'd convinced Dad to switch to electronic billing, then change the email addresses to accounts she controlled. He wasn't seeing the credit card statements, mortgage documents, or bank notifications that would have revealed the extent of her financial abuse. The third day, I focused on the twins' situation. Using my connections in the healthcare and education sectors, I learned that Tyler and Connor hadn't received proper medical care in over a year. Their school enrollment had been mysteriously withdrawn mid-semester, with Linda claiming she'd be homeschooling them. But there were no records of her purchasing curriculum materials, registering with the state's homeschool program, or documenting any educational progress. Neighbors confirmed what I'd suspected: the boys were frequently home alone, often for entire days. They'd been seen digging through garbage cans looking for food, asking neighbors for snacks, and playing in the street without supervision. Several people had considered calling authorities but hadn't wanted to get involved in family business. The picture that emerged was devastating. 2 young children were being neglected and used as weapons in Linda's psychological games. Their destruction of Jake's computer hadn't been random mischief, it had been orchestrated by an adult who wanted to hurt me and was willing to use children to do it. Armed with this information, I began phase 2 of my plan, building a network of allies and evidence. My first stop was Rebecca Martinez, a former colleague from the dental office who'd left to work for Child Protective Services. We met for coffee, and I carefully shared my concerns about the twins without revealing my full investigation. "Sarah, if even half of what you're describing is true, those children are in serious danger," Rebecca said, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "Educational neglect is just as serious as physical neglect in the eyes of the court. And if there's financial abuse happening in the home, it creates an unstable environment that's harmful to children." She explained the reporting process and what kind of evidence would be most compelling. Anonymous tips were taken seriously, especially when supported by documentation and witness statements. The key was providing specific dates, times, and observable behaviors rather than general accusations. "The challenge is that CPS is overworked and understaffed," Rebecca continued. "But when someone provides detailed, well-documented concerns, we have to investigate thoroughly. It's about building a case that protects the children while holding the adults accountable." My second ally was Jennifer Walsh, the real estate agent who'd become both a client and a friend. Over lunch, I mentioned my interest in expanding my bookkeeping services to include forensic accounting, helping people understand complex financial situations. "That's brilliant, Vera. Do you know how many divorce cases I see where people don't understand what their spouse has been doing with their money? There's definitely a market for that service." Jennifer had dealt with numerous cases of financial fraud in her real estate career. She explained how criminals use property transactions to hide assets and launder money, and how authorities track these activities when properly notified. "The key is paper trails," she said. "Every transaction leaves evidence. Cash purchases, Quick transfers, shell companies, they all create patterns that investigators can follow. The trick is getting the right people to notice those patterns. She also connected me with Tom Bradley, a forensic accountant who worked with divorce attorneys and law enforcement. Tom agreed to review my documentation of Linda and Marcus's activities, not as a formal engagement but as a professional consultation. What you found here is textbook financial fraud, Tom confirmed after reviewing my files. The property transfers, unreported income, hidden assets, it's sophisticated enough to be intentional but sloppy enough to be prosecutable. He explained how to properly document and report financial crimes to ensure authorities would take action. The key was presenting information in a way that made investigators' jobs easier, not harder. People think reporting crime means just calling and complaining. But if you want real action, you need to do the preliminary work. Organize the evidence, establish timelines, identify patterns. Make it so obvious that investigators can't ignore it. My third ally was unexpected, Marcus's ex-wife, Jessica. I'd never met her, but through mutual acquaintances, I was able to arrange a coffee meeting under the pretext of discussing blended family challenges. Jessica was a tired-looking woman in her mid-30s, working as a nurse while raising Tyler and Connor along with her teenage daughter Emma from her previous relationship. She was initially suspicious of my motives, but when I explained my concerns about the twins' welfare, she opened up completely. "I've been worried sick about them," Jessica admitted. "Marcus was never a great father, but at least when we were married, I could make sure they were fed and safe. Now I don't know what's happening to them half the time." She showed me photos on her phone from the twins' rare visits, pictures that revealed increasingly thin children with poor hygiene and behavioral problems. Tyler had started wetting himself again, something he hadn't done since he was 3. Connor had developed a stutter and became violent when frustrated. Linda won't let me talk to them on the phone. She says it's disruptive to their routine, but what routine? Last time they visited, Tyler told me they'd been eating cereal for dinner because nobody went grocery shopping. Jessica had tried reporting her concerns to CPS before, but as the non-custodial parent with no current visitation rights, her complaints weren't taken seriously. She'd also tried working through the court system, but legal proceedings were expensive and slow. If someone else reported the same concerns, someone with no custody agenda, it might carry more weight, she said hopefully. "I just want my boys safe and healthy." She provided me with medical records, school reports, and documentation of the twins' declining condition since moving in with Linda. The evidence was heartbreaking but crucial for building a compelling case. My fourth ally was Dave Morrison from Pinnacle Auto Sales. Our professional relationship had evolved into genuine friendship, and he'd mentioned several times that his dealership had connections throughout the business community. "Financial fraud is something we see occasionally in auto sales," Dave explained when I asked about reporting procedures. "People try to use fake income documentation, stolen identities, that kind of thing. The key is that authorities take it more seriously when it's reported by businesses rather than individuals." He introduced me to contacts at several banks, credit unions, and financial institutions. These professionals were trained to recognize patterns of fraud and had direct lines to regulatory agencies and law enforcement. "The thing about financial crime is that it's rarely isolated," one banker explained. "If someone's committing tax fraud, they're usually doing other illegal things too. And once authorities start investigating, they tend to find everything." With my network of allies in place and comprehensive documentation organized, I was ready for Phase 3, systematic reporting that would trigger multiple investigations simultaneously. But first, I had to address my own financial situation. The destroyed computer had been more than just a gift, it represented 8 months of sacrificed luxuries and careful budgeting. If I was going to rebuild Jake's setup and protect our future from Linda's vindictiveness, I needed to secure better income streams immediately. The job interviews at Pinnacle Auto Sales and Jennifer Walsh's real estate office weren't just about career advancement, they were about gaining the financial independence necessary to never again be vulnerable to people like Linda. Economic security would give Jake and me the freedom to make decisions based on what was right rather than what we could afford. Dave offered me the sales position that same week, with a starting salary that was nearly double my dental hygienist income. "Sarah, you understand people and you understand details. Those are the 2 most important skills in car sales." Jennifer's assistant position came with flexible hours that would allow me to maintain my bookkeeping clients while learning the real estate business. "I've been watching how you handle stress and complicated situations. You're exactly what my growing business needs." With 2 new income sources secured, I felt ready to begin the final phase of my plan. Linda thought she'd crushed my ability to provide for my son. Instead, she'd motivated me to build a stronger financial foundation than I'd ever had before. The irony was delicious. Her cruelty had forced me to take risks and make changes that would ultimately benefit Jake and me far more than our previous situation. Sometimes the worst thing someone can do to you turns out to be the best thing that ever happened. More interesting was Marcus's situation. My stepbrother wasn't just unemployed, he was actively avoiding employment to dodge the child support payments he owed his ex-wife. Linda had been coaching him on how to work under the table and hide income, something I discovered through a mutual acquaintance who'd been asked to pay Marcus in cash for odd jobs. The twins weren't in school despite being 7 years old. Linda had claimed they were being homeschooled, but I learned from a neighbor that the boys spent most days unsupervised while she went shopping or got her nails done. No educational materials, no structured learning, just video games and television. My dad's finances were the most concerning discovery. Through my bookkeeping connections, I learned that Linda had been slowly draining his retirement accounts for her personal expenses. She'd convinced him to put her name on all his accounts for convenience, then systematically transferred money to her personal credit cards and shopping accounts. Armed with this information, I made my first move. Dave Morrison was excited to meet with me about the sales position. "Sarah, you've got exactly the kind of attention to detail we need here. Plus, you already know our computer systems better than anyone." The job came with a substantial base salary plus commission, health benefits, and the kind of stable income I'd been dreaming about. More importantly, it came with connections throughout the automotive industry, including relationships with finance companies and banks. Jennifer Walsh was equally enthusiastic about bringing me on as her assistant. "I've been watching how you work, and you're incredibly organized. Real estate is all about managing details and deadlines, skills you've already proven you have." 2 weeks after Linda destroyed Jake's computer, I had lined up 2 new income streams that would more than double my current earnings. But income was just the foundation of my plan. The next phase involved some strategic phone calls. The first call went to the county's Child Protective Services office. I reported concerns about 2 7-year-old boys who weren't receiving proper education or supervision. I provided specific dates and times when I'd observed them home alone, along with documentation of Linda's absences during school hours. The second call went to the state's Department of Child Support Enforcement. I provided them with information about Marcus's cash employment and Linda's coaching about income hiding. I also mentioned the video evidence I'd observed of him discussing strategies to avoid his legal obligations. The third call went to the IRS reporting hotline. Linda and Marcus's pattern of cash transactions and unreported income constituted tax fraud, something the federal government takes very seriously. My fourth call was to my dad's bank. As someone with his account information through my bookkeeping work, he'd hired me to help organize his finances the previous year. I'd noticed several suspicious transactions. The bank's fraud department was very interested in the pattern of transfers to accounts my father claimed he'd never authorized. But the most important call went to Jake's school counselor. I explained that we'd experienced some family trauma and requested that Jake be evaluated for the school's accelerated computer science program. Given his passion for technology and the setback with his birthday gift, I wanted to ensure he had positive outlets for his interests. 3 weeks later, the dominoes started falling. CPS showed up at Linda's house on a Tuesday morning. The boys were found home alone, playing video games in pajamas at 11 a.m. on a school day. Linda was at a spa appointment, unreachable for 4 hours. Marcus was supposedly job hunting but was actually at a casino, something CPS verified through his location services and social media posts. The investigation revealed that Tyler and Connor hadn't attended school in over 2 months. Their educational records showed no evidence of homeschooling materials, curriculum, or progress documentation. The house was cluttered and unsanitary, with expired food in the refrigerator and dirty dishes piled in the sink. Within a week, the twins were placed in emergency foster care pending a full investigation. Linda's claims of being a devoted grandmother crumbled under scrutiny, especially when neighbors confirmed the boys were frequently unsupervised and underfed. The Department of Child Support Enforcement moved with impressive efficiency once provided with concrete evidence. Marcus's cash jobs were documented through financial records I'd helped compile, showing a pattern of deliberately hidden income. His ex-wife's attorney filed for contempt of court, and Marcus found himself facing potential jail time for willful non-payment of child support. The IRS audit notification arrived at Linda's house on a Friday afternoon. Years of unreported cash transactions, fraudulent deductions, and hidden assets had created a substantial tax liability. The federal government doesn't negotiate on tax fraud, and the penalties alone exceeded Linda's ability to pay. My dad's bank fraud investigation revealed that Linda had been systematically transferring his money without proper authorization. She'd forged his signature on several documents and used his account information to pay her personal expenses. The bank froze all accounts pending resolution, leaving Linda without access to her primary source of funding. The beautiful part was watching Linda's world collapse while she remained completely unaware of my involvement. Each disaster appeared to be the natural consequence of her own choices and actions. The authorities had simply noticed what was already happening and responded appropriately. Marcus broke first. Facing potential jail time and substantial financial penalties, he couldn't handle the pressure. He started drinking heavily and making increasingly desperate attempts to generate quick money. His desperation led to poor decisions that created additional legal problems, each one making his situation worse. Linda's response was predictably narcissistic. She blamed everyone except herself, the school system for being too rigid, CPS for being overly intrusive, the IRS for being unfair to honest taxpayers, and the bank for being discriminatory against women. Her victim narrative might have been convincing if the evidence weren't so overwhelming. My dad finally started asking questions when his bank accounts were frozen. The man who'd shrugged off my devastation suddenly became very interested in justice when his own finances were threatened. He hired an attorney and began untangling the web of financial abuse Linda had woven around his assets. The investigation revealed the extent of her manipulation. She'd convinced him to sign documents by claiming they were routine paperwork, then used his signature to authorize substantial transfers. She'd opened credit cards in his name and run up massive debts for her personal shopping. She'd even taken out a second mortgage on his house without his knowledge. 6 months after the grape soda incident, Linda's house of cards had completely collapsed. She faced criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and tax evasion. Her assets were frozen, her income sources eliminated, and her reputation in the community destroyed. The woman who'd laughed while my son's dreams were ruined was now crying to anyone who would listen about how unfairly she was being treated. Marcus lost his custody battle permanently when the court determined he was an unfit parent. His ex-wife was awarded full custody of Tyler and Connor, along with substantially increased child support payments that would be automatically deducted from any future employment. His gambling addiction and history of hiding income made him unemployable in any legitimate capacity. The twins were eventually returned to their mother, who'd remarried and could provide them with stability, education, and supervision. They started attending school regularly and receiving proper medical care for the first time in years. Ironically, Linda's destructive behavior had given them a chance at a better life. My dad's divorce proceedings moved quickly once the extent of Linda's fraud became clear. She'd violated the prenuptial agreement in multiple ways, voiding her claim to any of his assets. The court ordered her to repay everything she'd stolen, plus interest and penalties. Since she had no legitimate income or assets, the judgment would follow her for the rest of her life. But the most satisfying moment came 8 weeks after that terrible dinner. I was working late at Pinnacle Auto Sales, enjoying my new career and the financial security it provided, when my phone rang. It was my dad, calling from Linda's number. "Sarah? It's Dad." Linda wanted me to call and ask. "Well, she's wondering if you might be able to help with something." "What kind of help?" I asked, though I already knew. "She needs someone who understands computers and financial records to help organize her defense against these charges. Her lawyer says she needs someone who can explain the technical aspects to the court, and you're the only person we know who has that expertise." The irony was delicious. The woman who'd laughed while her grandchildren destroyed my work now needed my technical skills to save herself from the consequences of her own actions. "That's interesting, Dad. What does Linda think about asking me for help?" There was a long pause, then Linda's voice came on the line. Her tone was completely different from that night, humble, desperate, almost pleading. "Sarah, I know we've had our differences, but I'm in serious trouble here. These government people are saying I owe hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I don't understand any of the technical stuff they're talking about. You're so smart with computers and financial records. I was hoping maybe we could work something out." "Work something out?" I repeated. "Like what kind of arrangement were you thinking?" "Well, I know money's been tight for you, and I'd be happy to pay for your expertise. Maybe we could start fresh, put the past behind us?" I realized maybe I was too harsh about Jake's computer situation. Too harsh. She was calling the deliberate destruction of $4,000 worth of equipment too harsh, like she'd been slightly rude instead of vindictively cruel. "You know what, Linda? I'd love to help you understand something about consequences." "Oh, thank you. I knew you'd." If my son's computer can't work because your family destroyed it, then my expertise can't work for your legal problems. Accidents happen, right? It's just stuff. The silence stretched for several seconds before she exploded. You vindictive little bitch. This is serious. I could go to prison. You're right, I said calmly. Prison is serious. Maybe you should have thought about that before teaching your grandsons that destroying other people's property is funny. Maybe you should have considered consequences before laughing at a mother's heartbreak. Maybe you should have been more careful about committing fraud and tax evasion. I never committed fraud. This is all a misunderstanding. Linda, I work with financial records every day. I know exactly what fraud looks like, and so do the authorities. The evidence against you is overwhelming because you created it yourself through years of deliberate choices. Your father won't stand for this. He'll make you help me. I glanced across the dealership floor, where I was building a successful new career surrounded by people who respected my skills and integrity. My father had his chance to stand up for what's right. He chose to shrug and call destruction of property just stuff. Now he can shrug at your legal problems too. The call ended with Linda screaming obscenities, her mask of fake politeness finally discarded completely. My dad never called back to apologize or explain. He was too busy dealing with his own legal and financial problems as Linda's fraud case expanded to include her misuse of his identity and assets. The weeks that followed brought a strange sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Working at the auto dealership during the day and assisting Jennifer with real estate clients in the evenings, I found myself genuinely enjoying professional challenges for the first time since my divorce. The work was demanding but rewarding, and my colleagues treated me with respect that had been absent from my family relationships. Jake noticed the change immediately. "Mom, you seem different lately," he said one evening as we shared takeout Chinese food in our small living room. "Happier, I guess. Even after everything that happened." I looked at my son, this remarkable young man who'd handled our family crisis with maturity beyond his years. He'd watched his computer dreams get destroyed, seen his grandfather choose a toxic woman over his own daughter, and witnessed his mother transform pain into purposeful action. Through it all, he'd remained supportive and understanding. "Sometimes bad things happen to show us we're stronger than we thought," I told him. "And sometimes losing something helps us realize we deserved better all along." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Are you sad about Grandpa? I mean, he's still your dad." The question hit deeper than expected. My relationship with my father had been complicated long before Linda entered the picture. He'd always been conflict-averse, choosing peace over principle, comfort over courage. Linda hadn't changed him, she'd simply revealed who he'd always been. "I'm sad about who I thought he was," I admitted. "But I'm grateful to finally see who he really is. It helps me make better decisions about who deserves space in our lives." The conversation reminded me that healing isn't just about recovering from damage, it's about building something better from the pieces left behind. Jake and I were closer than ever, united by shared adversity and mutual respect. We'd learned to rely on each other and ourselves rather than hoping others would rescue us. My professional growth accelerated as word spread about my work ethic and attention to detail. Dave started giving me increasingly complex sales negotiations, trusting my ability to handle difficult customers and complicated financing arrangements. Jennifer began discussing the possibility of me obtaining my real estate license and joining her team as a full agent. "You have natural instincts for reading people and understanding what they really want," Jennifer explained during one of our strategy meetings. "Those skills are invaluable in real estate. Plus, your bookkeeping background means you understand the financial aspects better than most agents." The suggestion intrigued me. Real estate offered unlimited earning potential and the flexibility to build my own business while helping families find homes. After years of feeling financially vulnerable, the prospect of true economic independence was enormously appealing. I enrolled in evening real estate classes, studying contracts and property law while Jake worked on homework beside me at our kitchen table. The routine became our new normal, both of us pursuing education and growth, supporting each other's goals while building toward a more secure future. The legal proceedings against Linda and Marcus continued grinding through the system with predictable bureaucratic slowness. Each court date brought new revelations about the extent of their criminal behavior. Financial records revealed they'd been running various scams for years, targeting elderly victims and exploiting loopholes in government assistance programs. Marcus's gambling addiction had escalated beyond casual casino visits. He'd been involved with illegal betting operations, accumulating debts to dangerous people who didn't accept excuses about unemployment. His desperation had led him to steal from local businesses, forge checks, and even attempt identity theft using his father's information. The twins' situation stabilized gradually as Jessica worked with family court to regain full custody. Tyler and Connor began showing signs of recovery, better sleep patterns, improved appetites, and decreased anxiety. They started attending regular school again, making friends and participating in activities Linda had never allowed. They ask about their dad sometimes, Jessica confided during one of our occasional coffee meetings. But mostly they seem relieved to have routine and consistency. It's heartbreaking how little stability they had before. Watching the boys recover reinforced my conviction that exposing Linda and Marcus had been the right choice. Their criminal behavior hadn't just harmed adults, it had traumatized innocent children who deserved protection and care. 4 months later, Jake got his gaming computer after all. With my new income from the auto dealership and real estate work, I was able to afford an even better system than the original. We built it together over a weekend, turning the project into a learning experience about technology, planning, and the value of hard work. The new PC featured an RTX 4090 graphics card, Intel's newest i9-14900K processor, and 64 GB of RAM. The custom cooling system was more sophisticated than my first attempt, and Jake helped with every step of the installation process. His excitement and pride in our shared accomplishment meant more than any store-bought gift ever could. More importantly, Jake had learned something valuable about standing up for yourself and the consequences of actions. He'd watched his mother refuse to be a victim, using intelligence and determination to address injustice rather than accepting it passively. The computer sat in our living room, its RGB lighting creating beautiful patterns across the walls while Jake played his favorite games. Every time I saw it, I remembered Linda's laughter and my father's shrug. But instead of anger, I felt satisfaction. The machine represented more than entertainment, it was proof that some people's cruelty only serves to demonstrate others' resilience and resourcefulness. Linda was eventually sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for tax fraud, plus substantial fines and restitution payments. Marcus lost his parental rights permanently and struggled with addiction and homelessness. My dad sold his house to pay legal fees and moved into a small apartment, finally understanding the cost of choosing toxic people over family loyalty. The twins thrived with their mother, attending school regularly and participating in activities Linda had never allowed. They occasionally asked about their grandmother and father, but seemed relieved to be in a stable environment where destruction of property wasn't considered entertainment. As for me, I learned that revenge doesn't require dramatic confrontation or elaborate schemes. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their own actions. Linda had built her entire life on manipulation, fraud, and the exploitation of others' kindness. All I did was ensure that the appropriate authorities noticed what she was already doing. The destroyed gaming computer had cost me $4,000 and 8 months of work. But it had also revealed exactly who my family members really were beneath their polite facades. That knowledge, painful as it was, proved invaluable in protecting myself and Jake from further harm. 8 months later, Jake was thriving in his accelerated computer science program. I was earning more money than ever before in jobs I genuinely enjoyed, and we both learned that sometimes losing something precious can lead to gaining something even better. The grape soda incident had ended one chapter of our lives and begun another, better one. Linda had been right about one thing: if her family couldn't have happiness through honest means, they wouldn't have it at all. But she'd failed to realize that her destructive behavior would ultimately destroy only herself, while strengthening the people she'd tried to hurt. The last I heard, she was still in prison, still blaming everyone except herself for her situation, still convinced that she was the real victim. Some people never learn from consequences, no matter how severe they become. But Jake and I had learned the most important lesson of all: never let someone else's cruelty determine your worth or dictate your future. Sometimes a smile and quiet departure are the beginning of the most satisfying victory possible.